Story 1, yes, in a heartbeat. But do I have to stop myself from talking, or do I automatically lose the ability to talk? Because I feel I would accidentally mess up at some point. Story 2, have you seen the Twilight Zone episode on this topic? Story 3, there is a Twilight Zone episode about this called The Silence. The man does not think he can do it, but he is desperate for the money, so he cuts his vocal cords. The man who bets he cannot do it never had the money in the first place. That said, I would love to do this for the money, but I teach, so it would be impossible. Story 4. That sounds socially, emotionally, and mentally devastating. Many stereotypical Reddit users here act like they are completely alone and hate socializing, but do not realize they would suffer without the small amount of social interaction they actually have daily. I understand there are other means of communication, so there is no need for additional replies pointing out the obvious. There are no specifics in the hypothetical scenario about whether it refers only to speaking or includes all forms of communication. I was assuming no talking at all in any way. If you interpreted it differently, that is fine. This is a hypothetical situation on Reddit, not a serious conversation. Story 5. My life would probably improve dramatically just by not opening my big mouth, so the moment is just a bonus. Story 6. Yes. It would be very hard and I probably will not succeed, but I will try. Also, my 2-year-old may have some emotional damage from it. Story 7. I don't have $1 million, but if I didn't have to talk for a year, I might be willing to set up a fundraising campaign. Story 8. My family all learns sign language, and we are debt-free for the rest of our lives. Love it. I would not be able to keep my job though. I guess I could find a new one in a year. Story 9. Absolutely. I talk for about 5 minutes a day, and that is too much. But if I were a blowhard like the guy in that Twilight Zone episode with the same premise, yes, that would be very hard. I guess it is why he took the measures he did. It is too bad the guy did not pay up at the end. Story 10. This is a Twilight Zone episode. A big mouth who wouldn't shut up is offered $1 million if he does not talk for 1 year. An old rich man can't take the constant blabbering anymore, so the big mouth accepts the challenge. As the year comes close to the end, the old rich man tries to let the big mouth off the hook. The big mouth replies, "No, I got this. I need the money." Writing it down. The year ends and it is payday. The old man says, "Sorry, but I don't have the money. I'm broke." He also wonders how the big mouth managed not to talk for a whole year. The big mouth removes a scarf from his neck to reveal a nasty scar. He had his vocal cords removed. The irony. Story 11. No. I am married. Not talking for a year would be catastrophically stupid. Besides, I like talking with my wife. Story 12. There is a Twilight Zone episode about this type of scenario that clearly states my answer should always be no. Story 13. Only if I have a legal contract with the money in an account first. Twilight Zone fans understand why. Story 14. Reminds me of an old Twilight Zone episode titled The Silence, Season 2, Episode 25. A wealthy man bets an obnoxious club member $500,000 that he cannot go a year without talking. Story 15. I think around 2022 I did. I was unemployed and bought minimal food from Walmart. I do not think I actually spoke to anyone that whole year. I did not get $1 million for it. Story 16. I feel like I would learn more from not talking for a year than I would gain from the million. It is a win-win. Story 17. I've seen this Twilight Zone episode. The key is to have surgery to paralyze your vocal cords. I am pretty sure it worked out for that person. Story 18. As someone who thinks out loud constantly, not talking for a year would be basically impossible for me to do. Story 19. Your bet was an episode of the Twilight Zone called The Silence where the loudmouth man was offered $500,000 to keep quiet for a year. He cut out his vocal cords because he knew he could not keep quiet. Everyone who contributed did not pay because they believed he would fail. In the end, he was unable to speak and did not receive any money. Story 20. Did you ever see that Twilight Zone episode, The Silence? It was phenomenal and should be required viewing. Story 21. There was a Twilight Zone episode that did exactly this. Season 2, Episode 25, The Silence. Interesting ending. Story 22. Hell yeah, I like not talking. There was actually an episode of The Twilight Zone about exactly that. The guy made it a year without talking. Then it turned out the other guy did not have the money and could not pay him. The guy who did not talk had cut his vocal cords to keep himself from talking. Sheesh. I love The Twilight Zone. Story 23. I couldn't. I have a 2.5-year-old daughter who is in such a developmental stage that this would cause too much of a negative impact. Explaining to her that daddy would stop talking or interacting verbally would be unbearable for me. Story 24. Can I make noises? Use my voice at all? I would be concerned that a year without using my vocal cords would cause some damage. Story 25. Since it is hypothetical, I will have my ability to speak taken away and gladly receive $1 million. It would encourage people to text instead of calling me. Nice. Story 26. Oh yeah, you didn't specify I can't communicate, just be mute. I am going to learn sign language and sometimes use text-to-speech. Story 27. Easy. I can just type on a computer. I can mute with no problem. In fact, it is often how I get better results. This is easy money for me. Story 28. I'd screw it up and lose somehow. I talk too much. Like Run DMC said, I taught the cavity creeps to watch out for Crest. My mom and stepdad are in their 90s. When they pass, I'm giving the eulogy for both. There is a good possibility that one or both of them could pass and I'd have to talk. Unless, what if I'm alone and prepare a eulogy on my phone and play it back? Who would know if I said it now or a while before taking the 1 million challenge? Story 29. Is there a procedure that could help me? I do not know if I could go 365 days, much less 65 minutes, without talking to a single person. I would go crazy if people could not understand what I am trying to say. Story 30. I have already done that for 12 years. I was completely nonverbal due to undiagnosed cerebral palsy. I would do it again for money. Story 31. I could, but I will not. I could not imagine not being able to talk to my daughter, even if it were for $1 million. Story 32. Does talking include text or sign language communication? I would love to do a year without speaking, but not communicating in any language would be much harder. Story 33. Talking to another human? Sure. But I talk to myself and my cat pretty regularly. That would be tough to give up. Story 34. Easily, I went a few years until recently without. Does that mean I get at least 3 million? I can go for longer if it were not for having to speak to doctors now. How much do you have? Story 35. No, because at the end of that year you would find out that the $1 million did not really exist, and knowing you would not be able to keep quiet, you cut your vocal cords, so it was all for nothing. Story 36. Definitely. I am on Social Security and have a very limited income, so that amount of money would support me for life. Story 37. I have worked for a year without pay, just by being isolated with no friends or family. Can I claim the money retroactively? Story 38. Yes, talking is often more of a chore for me. I used to fake having a sore throat when I was in school just so I would not have to talk to anyone for the day. Story 39. Is verbally talking or any form of communication allowed? Also, can you talk to yourself or is that not permitted? Story 40. Probably not. The severe internalizing would likely lead to a mental break for me. I know I could type, but verbal processing is my primary way of dealing with life. Story 41. I would just live in the woods so I am not missing anything. Also, you can still write. It is an easy workaround. Story 42. No, because I know there would be games attached to it. You talked in your sleep. You lose. You yowled in pain when that hammer hit your thumb. No money for you. You sighed when you sat down. That counts as talking. Story 43. I will just walk around with a pen and sticky notes. Most of my communication is over text anyway. Phone calls can be emails. Story 44. I tend to be talkative, but I managed, I think, 7 days on a silent Buddhist retreat some years ago. I must admit I found it hard. Story 45. Do you mean no verbal talking or no communication at all? Can I text, email, or write notes but not speak out loud? Or can I not communicate with anyone? Either way, the answer is yes. Story 46. I could try, but it would not work. I might slam my finger with a hammer, hit my head or shins, or run into someone entitled in the store. I will have words coming out of my mouth. Story 47. Do I get the money before or after the year? Because if I have to be silent beforehand, it would be really difficult to sustain my monthly income. If I get the cash first and then the silent period starts, it would be much easier. I would just start a year-long vacation around the world and pretend I am silent. Story 48. Probably not. I talk to myself and make up songs to sing to the cats constantly, so I would fail the challenge in hours. If it was just to not talk to another person, sure, sign me up. Story 49. No, not even a question. I would never be able to make it. I talk to myself to work through problems all the time. Story 50. Am I around anyone? I never stop talking. My daughter and I have enough energy to power a small town. If I am by myself, I could manage. Unless you count talking to yourself. Then I am in trouble. Story 51. To other people or in general. Are we taking a vow of complete and utter silence? Because singing is cool and it would make it easy if I could talk to myself like Smeagol or Gollum. Story 52. Can we still communicate? Like writing notes or texting? Honestly, it would be extremely hard and may become very depressing, but as long as everyone around me knew the goal I had, I think I could do it. $1 million would set me up very well for my future. I could pay off my student loans, buy a home with no mortgage, and invest the rest. Story 53. Do I have to pay that much to go a year without talking? Or do I get that much for not talking? I am not against either option, by the way. Story 54. I would try, but I am sure I would mess up. The only way it could work for me is if my ability to talk was taken away for the year. Story 55. I work in a blue-collar job. There is a hypothetical joke about how far you would go for however much money. I have quieted rooms by saying I would perform a sexual act on a man on camera just to pay off the mortgage. I would live that down and stop talking to my coworkers. There are only a few things I would not do to escape the rat trap of the workforce. So yes, I would be quiet for a year. Story 56. What is the context? Is it no talking to strangers? No talking verbally? Can I use a voice assistant to speak for me? Can I text? I think most people can go without talking directly and verbally for a year. It would be hard for some, but it is doable. Mute people do this every day. If you said no direct verbal communication for a whole year, that is a different story. Still, people have done that without issue. $1 million goes a long way to living off the grid for a year. That is not really a problem. People have lived in their mom's basement for years without talking. Story 57. Yes. It will force me to be a better listener and do a better job of filtering thoughts instead of just injecting myself into a conversation. The money is a great way to sweeten the deal as well. Story 58. Yes. I have been nonverbal almost my entire life due to autism and motor speech disorder with language delay. Even with speech therapy and treatments, I am still struggling to speak. In fact, the main reason I am trying to become verbal now as an adult is so I can provide for myself. If I were to earn a significant income, I would be okay remaining silent forever. Story 59. Talking is overrated. Text everything. Email sometimes if I feel like I need to respond. I'd go 3 million for double or nothing. Anyone want to take me up on it? You know where I am. Tons of things resolve themselves if you wait 24 hours. Story 60. This challenge seems like it would automatically exclude anyone with any form of involuntary verbal syndrome, such as Tourette syndrome with a verbal component. To include them, I propose a similar challenge where someone has to say words or produce verbal sounds every few minutes, even while sleeping, for an entire year. You do not need to have a verbal syndrome or condition to participate, but it may make it easier during sleeping hours. The same applies to the nonverbal challenge. How will you stop yourself from talking in your sleep? Story 61. If screaming in pain or laughing does not count, then I am in easy. Otherwise, many people would try to sabotage me in ways I cannot control, either to be malicious or to use it as a means of extortion to get that prize money, assuming this is public knowledge. Story 62. I can sign, so it should not be a problem. However, work might be difficult. Can I get $100,000 to $125,000 up front? Story 63. Sure. I would just move deep into the Mojave Desert and read for a year. Why? Free money a year in the desert. It's all good. Story 64. I hardly talk, so that would be an easy task. I sometimes go days without uttering a single sound when I do not have to leave the house. Story 65. Absolutely. I'm quiet anyway. I hate making phone calls and would gladly text or email instead. I would probably learn sign language too. Story 66. To other people is easy. I hate talking to people. I prefer talking to myself or my dogs. I doubt very much that I could succeed. Story 67. Define talking. Using your voice? I suppose I could take a crash course in sign language for 1 million, but I would probably lose my job. I would still be miserable, though. And if this is no communication, no, I would not. Story 68. I know this is always a dumb question, but I don't have the capacity to do this. I doubt I could do it for a week, let alone a month. Story 69. Yes. I would probably start by going to my doctor and asking for a note that excuses me from work calls and meetings for a few weeks. Then I would submit my resignation. Between the last few weeks of pay plus vacation payout, I would be fine for a couple of months. After that, I have enough saved to keep me afloat for most of the rest of the year. I would keep making my minimum payments on my line of credit, then use it for my last few months, continuing to make the minimum payments. This would avoid any negative impact on my credit score and provide access to what I need to survive at a cost of a couple $100s a month. At the end of the year, my credit score would still be fine, and my debt should not be a problem. I would also have very close to $1 million after paying that debt down, which would keep me afloat until I find a new job. Then I would buy a house with whatever is left. Story 70. I would not last 10 minutes. The first song that pops into my head immediately comes out of my mouth. Story 71. No, because I would not be able to tell my dog to stop barking at the wind or tell him that he is a good boy. Story 72. No. Communicating is necessary for mental health and my job. I don't value money that highly. I have enough. Story 73. Yes, because this is only 1 year of my life, but how can I scream then? Out loud. I have $1 million in my pocket. Story 74. Yes, I would learn sign language. There are millions of people who cannot speak and do not receive $1 million. Additionally, I believe there is something profound about communication without speaking that would greatly enhance my relationships. It sounds wonderful. Story 75. No, I would fail that pretty quickly. I may be introverted, but I am not going to sit by and watch other people converse without having something to say when I feel like it. Story 76. I would love to. I would wear the contract around my neck for anyone who has a problem with me not speaking. Story 77. If I could use paper and pen or pencil or a device to write or text, sure. I had an alarm device to push a button if the house caught on fire, so I would not be dangerously voiceless. Then sure, why not? Story 78. Talking or communicating? I would not go 1 year without communicating because it is nearly impossible to do. Story 79. I would need to quit my job as a lawyer, but I would do it. I can still send texts and emails as well as make documents, but I would not be able to talk to my family. Story 80. What about talking in your sleep? I would be very upset about losing $1 million because my asleep self told the spiders in my pillowcase to get out before Willem Dafoe drives my rocket bed to Hogwarts. Story 81. Absolutely. I'm not talkative, but once you get through the first 4 to 6 weeks of keeping quiet, it starts to become the norm and you adapt from there. When it gets tough, just remember how much you are getting paid per hour to stay quiet and treat that 1-year countdown like a goal to reach. Story 82. Shit. Is this for work? All communication through email? Story 83. Depends on how it goes. If I lose my voice for a year, sure. I will wear a notepad around my neck. If it is one of those, if you talk, you lose things, then it is impossible to win. Story 84. I would say yes if I did not have children, but I could never do that to my children. I do not have friends or family, but I could never go a year without talking to them. Story 85. Does sleep talking count? I don't do that very often, but on the rare occasion, I'll wake myself up by audibly saying, "What?" Story 86. Can I still communicate with notes or sign language or email? Absolutely, if so. Otherwise, not. A year of no communication is genuinely debilitating. A year of heavy inconveniences is doable, especially for a million. Story 87. Have you ever been to a silent retreat where there is no talking? People tend to go a little mad after a few days. Story 88. I don't even like talking. It's exhausting. I wouldn't lose my speaking skills because I have an inner monologue. Story 89. No $1 million is a lot, but not enough to retire after clearing all debts, such as a mortgage. Not talking would mean I would lose my job, a job I actually quite like. It would also mean I could not talk to my partner, and that alone is enough to decline the offer. Story 90. Verbally? I guess that is what talking is. No, if I could talk to myself, then I would go a few days, not consecutively necessarily, for $2,740 each day. Talking and communication are essential to life. Story 91. Well, yes, I would be willing, but I would totally mess up or have to quit doing some things. For example, going out in public because there would be too many confusing moments. I would not be able to use Reddit for that year due to too many confusing moments. Watching horror movies would be the same. So, I guess what I am saying is I would be willing, but I would totally fail, laugh out loud. Story 92. Assuming there are no caveats such as no talking to humans only, then the answer is no. My dog is 10 years old and loves being spoken to. $1 million is not worth a year of him being confused and anxious. Story 93. No. I have family and friends that I like to talk to. I have a child who needs to hear my actual voice. 1 million is not enough to give up that. Story 94. Prediction. 90% of women would say no. The other 10% of women would say yes but fail the challenge. Story 95. 100% would not be difficult at all. I would go to a remote location and spend my time building cabins, fishing, and surviving. Maybe Alaska. Story 96. Absolutely not. I already have enough money to be physically healthy at the moment. I do not get enough social interaction to be emotionally healthy. Story 97. As long as I can get paid monthly so I can pay bills, then yes. I would quit my job and do it in a heartbeat. Story 98. Probably not, since saying something like, ow, shoot, when you get hurt would be considered talking. I even say hello to animals, so I would lose right there. Story 99. When do I start? I would like to begin because I am already an introvert, do not talk much with people, and you are offering a great opportunity. Story 100. I am leaning towards yes, but how would this work during school? Would the teachers be aware of my inability to speak? Story 101. I did not speak to my family for at least 3 years while living with them because she would take out her frustrations on me. The brokers were pressuring her due to our vacancies, turning every viewing into a demand that she sell 117 Mott Street. It was very abusive and they got away with it, so our store remained unrented since the 1998 arson. We were also being harassed through our market apartment rentals, which also remained vacant for at least 3 years, as proven by the lack of Con Edison usage. Meanwhile, New York City government raised our property taxes despite these painful vacancies. The New York State Department of Labor penalized us for not earning enough to pay ourselves, despite demanding and reviewing our financial records multiple times during the decade in which the Department of Labor took money from our account. Our property taxes increased from $33,000 to $190,000 annually, while Letitia James earned more income on 296 Lafayette Avenue but was taxed only $19,000 per year for the same assessment. I am sure Mayor Eric Adams's rental property was taxed similarly affordably. My mother, like a coward, took her frustrations out on the only person she trusted would not retaliate. One night, my brother mimicked her, so I stopped speaking to them. I only relented when my brother contracted scabies at his job, and my mother ran to her building and chose to sleep on 2 folding chairs for 2 weeks. I found him wearing shredded dress shirts coming apart at the shoulder seams and cuffs that no one at work pointed out. He never missed a day of work, even when covered in the severe itching and rash of scabies. He earned minimum wage for over 20 years, working with the bartender at Guy Fieri's restaurant who served him pulled pork sandwiches and the Thai restaurants that shared staff meals with him. So he was not just eating instant noodles. He turned over his salary to support the overtaxed 117 Mott Street, while his black coworker never even bought him a coffee despite my brother covering his backdoor job every Monday so this coworker could take long weekends in Florida for years, collecting 5 days' pay while working only 4. It is a great luxury to be able to abuse someone without fear when you are insignificant and bullied by Chinatown, Yangtze Midtown, and New York City government. It would be easier if one could indulge in abusing someone as much as they like to alleviate their pain, similar to teaching Chinese takeout delivery workers how it feels to be Emmett Till. The problem is that at some point, the recipient is unable to recover. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.